Hello and welcome back to THU TV. I'm Chris Nichols. I'm hosting a series of talks on technology and creativity. And I just want to remind everyone that you guys should go and try to get THU TV, the video on demand portion, which will have all the talks that people are able to show. There's going to be a whole lot of them. So just go to trojan-unicorn.com/TV and you can get all the information on getting this year's series of TV. It's a great value. I think it's about 59 euros or something like that. Really great and lots of good content on there. But for my last talk, I've got Jessica here. Jessica, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. I've been hanging out with you all week. And I've been talking a lot about stuff, and I had this great idea that you should be my last guest.
Brilliant. It must have been the rosé.
But lots of rosé was involved. But it's I think you bring something very interesting to the table that people would be interested in finding out about. Tell them a little bit about what you do.
What I currently do. Okay. So I am what's known as an experience designer. So I've been doing a lot of explanation here. That was unnecessary because I think a lot of people here know what it is. But I started doing it at a point at which it was not a known thing. And I was working with a lot of designers and artists to make websites. And I was a producer for that. And what I realized is that we were designing things for ways that humans don't consume them. Like all our designers had giant screens, yet the people who went to movie websites had little screens. So what I did was try to help these designers by drawing out the schematics of the way my little sister or my mom might experience their website. And I had these crappy little drawings, and they're like, you know what you are? You're an information architect.
You're an information architect.
That's what the term was for experience design back in the mid-2000s.
Okay.
So I just started doing that, and it became a more formalized role. I was so bad at it that I couldn't even draw a box using a box tool correctly. But it really was about letting design shine and not letting technology and technological handicaps get in the way of people experiencing the design that these designers wanted.
So you see, this is exactly why you were wondering, why would I want to talk to you? Because you're exactly that bridge that can bridge technology and design.
Oh, and I've met so many neat people here, video game designers, motion designers, even I'm noticing illustrators are beginning to add a little bit of interactivity into their work, and that's where I come in now.
Okay. But I mean, so really, you call it experience designer, but really, everyone's been using UI for a while, and then suddenly, about 5-6 years ago, everyone started using the term UX, right? So instead of user interface, it's user experience, right? So what do you think the difference is? Where's that bridge where it used to be UI, and now it's called UX? So where's that connection or difference?
Well, so initially, when I started, it was almost a library science. It is, how do you present information, whether it's visual information or text-based information, to a person in a way that they can consume and identify with.
Okay.
So then it went into this we need to pay attention to the UI of products. Designers didn't have a seat at the table in these major corporations. The engineers did. So then they're all right, we can program the thing, but we now recognize we're not the best people to put a face upon it.
Okay.
And that's where it started becoming UI. And then after UI, I'm not the most talented UI designer. I barely consider myself one. It's the experience of I go to people's houses and I watch, I see the way they touch things and the way they hold things.
Okay.
And I use that as a science to help UI designers make decisions about the UI. So UX is more the whole system. When you go to a theme park and you have a magic badge, what does that mean for you as you move from point to point to point? And then I'll work with UI designers and motion designers to kind of make it seamless. UI is now just one little picture.
UI is just a portion of what the experience is, right?
Yep.
But it's also a flow, right? There's something about the flow that's important. And we were talking earlier about how, my friends go, it's it needs to be so intuitive that there's no instructions.
Yep. And it's happening with invisible interfaces now. You've got Alexas, you've got driving voice navigations, and they don't always have a visual expression.
Right.
So how do you figure out how somebody interacts with a creative thing and a digital thing using only voice?
right.
And they're figuring out it doesn't work too well. Like,
right.
It's coming, like, that's why Amazon now has that Amazon show and
Right.
like other things, because
You need an extra layer.
you do. Without visuals, it's very linear, but people aren't linear creatures. We kind of like to abstract things, and the way a child asks Alexa a thing is so different than a granny.
Right.
Like,
Well, it's also interesting to me is, and it's a little bit of a side note, but just let's talk about the voice for a second. When you say something to Alexa, let's say, or to Siri or Google Now or whatever, you get one answer,
yes,
as opposed to a choice of answers.
yes,
Which is also interesting because pretty much like we basically have to trust that it's the right answer, because before people complained that people only click on the first page of a Google search, but that's 10 answers.
yep, and you're not going to know how to go backwards. Like, do you say, Alexa, go backwards?
Right.
Like, and all the
Because
answers.
that just makes it longer and pointless.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, and it's such a trickery, like, slippery slope to
Right.
navigate. But I was hanging out with, she's from China. I had an intern this summer, and she taught me about the Chinese Alexa. That's so much smarter.
How
And
does
it does.
Okay, explain that, please.
So it has this visual interface, right? And it greets you when you enter the room. And what's interesting that Alexa and other interfaces here don't do yet is recognize who you are and adjust themselves visually to match who you are. So I forgot what it's called. It's in English, it translates to little fish, little fish.
Okay.
So you walk in and instead of Alexa, you're like, little fish, little fish.
Okay.
And then its visual display, if you're a child, will increase. The font size gets big, and it uses simple words. Same thing if an elderly person does it. And if you're maybe somebody like me who can read at a distance, it's snappier with its information.
Interesting.
Like, it's leagues ahead
Wow.
of where we are.
And who's making this?
I don't know. I know it's like if you knew the Chinese term for little fish,
Okay.
that's something I'm going to have to look up.
Okay. But let's go back to the idea of interface, right? Of the idea of how you operate. The example I was given is like, when you buy your new iPhone, it doesn't come with instructions.
Nope.
You don't need them, right? And when you download an app it doesn't have to be iPhone, it can be Android, whatever, but you buy a new app, that doesn't come with instructions. Nothing comes with instructions anymore. They're not needed. So people have gotten much, much better at. So here's my question, actually. Is there just a set of rules that people have come to accept? Or are we just designing interfaces that are much more intuitive in general?
Oh, interesting. I guess it's a combination of both, right? Like the first time you've ever assembled a piece of IKEA furniture, you've probably like, but it follows its own design rules and design paradigms. You've got that squeaky thing that you kind of crank, and you need certain jiggers in the jagger, and it might be completely uneven until you tighten it.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. I don't know if everybody knew how to use an iPhone the second it came out, which was, I think, 2008?
2007.
It was as friendly as it could possibly be, but there is this kind of acquired information and assumption you make, which Apple in the beginning, they remember when you went to go look at their periodicals, they looked like newspapers on a shelf. So they created this like bridge moments in their interfaces to help us cavemen connect with what we were trying to actually do.
And then also it was interesting because I think his name is Duarte something. He's the main designer behind the Android interface, right? And then that sort of leapfrogged the Apple one, and then Apple adjusted, and all of a sudden, like the way things worked started to sort of become this very clean interfaces are very popular now.
Yeah. And I think Samsung was one of the first people to do that on the Android sense. Like, I was an Android girl.
That was actually Samsung wasn't the one. It was actually guidelines by Android to set this up. And they called it material design.
Yes. And Samsung was, I think, they just took it quite seriously.
They did,
Whereas everybody else was like,
I know everything looked like bubbly-gook and stuff like that.
Yep. And Android, to a degree, is still was a slightly different audience in that they were more technical, and technical people want more power. They want to see the stuff that people like me don't want to see.
Right.
They want to see kind of the sausage making and make the VPN style like decisions that they want to make, whereas my mom, myself don't.
Right. What about just your general idea of software? Like when you design software, what are some of the guidelines? If I say, okay, I've got an application that I want to write, and if I go to someone like you, how would you help me with those rules, as an example?
Well, one of the first things I do is obviously I work with brilliant researchers. We go hang out in people's houses and ask them how they currently do stuff, because we tend to try to create stuff that hasn't existed before, like weird things. Like, I mean, chatbots are the thing of the day, like, but like a chatbot that helps somebody deal with diabetes, and stuff like that. But we just research how people currently do stuff and try to emulate that as much as possible. Like, creating a new habit is pushing water uphill. Like, you're not going to get it done quite easily. So meet with them, and then also like a part.
So what do you mean by creating a new habit? Like in the sense that you want to teach someone a new habit, or you want to use their existing?
You want to use their existing habits to kind of like parlay into a new thing you want to use. You want
so
them
intuitive
to use.
is based on old habits. In a
Very
sense.
much, very, very much, and like they'll learn it if it's like super valuable. Like we used to order taxis. The Uber was a strange thing, or Airbnb staying in a stranger's house was a strange thing. But now that we have it, if it gets taken away, we're like rabble. Like it's disappeared, because that new habit took no time to create.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like the Uber experience was an interesting one too, because it took on something that was so fundamentally like ingrained in us about having a taxi and how much it costs and everything. And it simplified so much, also made it cheaper. And then it had to adjust itself as we went along and added more features. But generally, yeah, you're right. It was like, I opened Uber, and it was very straightforward on how to use it.
Like the best interface, like I know I succeeded at my job if nobody talks about my interface. Like, whoever sits there and talks about the Uber interface or the Airbnb, like, we sweat over this stuff. But, you did a good job.
So you're just like a visual effects person. And I'll tell
Is
you
that
what,
true?
Well, a visual effects person says, if no one notices that there's a visual effects, then they've done an amazing job.
That's it. They're there to get what you promise them. In the end of what the product you're creating. If they're noticing they're using an interface to do it, you've kind of done something wrong there. Like, that they have to think about it.
What was the quote I heard? And I guess it's an old quote, but I heard it for the first time, is if you have to explain the interface, interfaces are like jokes. If you have to explain them, then they're not very good.
Or it takes you like 5 seconds to get, and it's like,
it's like, what am I doing? Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much so. So that's what I try to do. And another piece of interface design is not just the user, but the company who launches it. How easy is it to maintain? How easy is Uber for drivers to use? So that's where you kind of get into this like whole systems thinking, like how many assets do they need to create, and when and how do they integrate them, is all stuff that goes into.
So what I've noticed, okay, if I'm going to go into video games for a little bit. So I had a chat with a friend of mine who works at Naughty Dog. He's actually one of the writers at Naughty Dog. He's a great guy. And we were talking about the idea that, when you had a video game back in the day, it actually used to come with instructions on what the buttons were to do what and everything else. And sometimes in some video games, they still come up with like the picture of the controller of all, and you have to like, what's the thing for that? What's that? And so they are designing a level inside of video games now, which teaches you to game as part of the story.
And Twitter did that when Twitter first launched.
Did they?
Yeah.
How did they do that? Tell me about the Twitter experience.
So they had, there was this window, and even in the field, it's like, what are you up to today? I think it said something like that. So even the form label told you what to do. But it had just these, the setup process actually made you do something during it that proved the concept of Twitter. And by the time you're done setting up, you've kind of almost already
used Twitter.
Tweeted.
Right, but I think that's the way that people think of, like, if they're going to design a video game or do a video game, to think about that process, right?
Yeah.
To think about how it works, and not to make it boring.
Right.
Because I'm talking about video games because there's a lot of people who work in video games who
I
are
love
here.
games. I
Yeah,
absolutely do.
but like I played Uncharted, right? Or Uncharted 4, which was written by Josh, actually, my friend Josh. So he was talking specifically about, I was telling him that the intro or the tutorial of the game was actually like the backstory of the main character. So you got to know the backstory of the character by going through him as a kid. So you got to go as a kid, as he was learning to become the person, you were learning to do the moves or whatever it happened to be.
Yes, it kind of reminds me of Fable. If
Fable?
you've ever played Fable.
No, tell me about Fable.
Similar kind of thing. You have your companion dog, and because, who doesn't like a companion dog?
Sure.
Like, you just learn how to use it because of some sort of emotional investment in making it happen. Mm-hmm. The way you kind of move the controllers is absolutely intuitive with the way it should work.
Right.
Like, Rory bought the Vive.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we have one at home, and there's a bow and arrow game. And, it's like a part of the demo. But your hand, actually, the controller starts shaking
as
the
you go,
further you pull back.
Right.
Like, that's no explanation needed. No manual will ever, describe to you that your hand will start shaking. It just happens.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. Well, what are some of the other examples that you can think of experience designs that are really interesting, that could be interesting to some people to just know about?
Man, well, I think a lot of people are. What I'm really interested in now is designing for kind of the augmented virtual reality. I think a lot of designers of my age are super interested in that. I started designing 2005, and then it was mobile for a while, and now this is kind of the new horizon for us.
Yeah, and it's extraordinarily important.
And there are applications from healthcare to entertainment,
right.
In VR, for example, burn victims. They've done experiments with burn victims that you put on a VR headset and you just look at ice. You look at pictures of the North Pole, and it actually resulted in a reduction of perceived pain, which resulted in a reduction of the necessity for drugs, which resulted in in less, perhaps over time, addiction to those drugs and the recovery from those drugs.
Wow.
VR did that.
That's amazing.
So I actually am so fascinated to be here because there's so many designers who I will put my money on that I will be working with in 10 years, 5 years. That will be this new way.
Well, I think that's been a subject. Actually, it's come up a few times on these series of talks that I've done here, where the interface of VR is a confusing. No one really knows what that's going to be like. The controllers are you're used to the keyboard and the mouse, right?
Yep.
And so that's another point, is you're so used to keyboard and mouse. If I'm playing a video game, I already know that ASW, I can,
Totally.
I know where to put my fingers to play any video game, even though I've never played it.
Yep.
Now that's a learned experience,
Absolutely.
Right? But with VR, you got these controllers, and it's pretty good. They do a pretty good job of showing you the controllers in front of you, but you don't really know what they can do yet, and you don't need. We're so used to the windowed experience that we when you can surround your world with it. I don't know what are you predicting that interface is going to look like?
Well, so I love watching whenever people come over to our place and put on the Vive for the first time. That is
so you probably observe how they try to use it.
They're not intuitive. Rory's no, you do it this way. There's a huge learning curve to these controllers for VR. I did read, and China, once again, doing awesome stuff, is because of the advent of 3D printing technology, and now Vive has that, I forgot what it's called now, but a little piece that you can add on to any 3D object.
Oh, yes,
like a baseball bat,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
so,
and it'll track it.
Yeah, exactly. So we even haven't seen that very much in the US, but from what I understand, in China it's huge. You want to ride a horse, they print a 3D horse that rocks to give you that full physicality of using it. Though, it's not going to be available for every thing you do.
Okay. But have you tried the Oculus controllers?
No, I just got the ones that come for the Gear VR.
The Vive ones are the ones that have the little circle on top.
Yeah.
And those were the first ones that I used. And
Is
they're
it
pretty
this
good.
little thumb pad one?
The other one is, you look at it. If you haven't seen, we'll look it up later. But it's got a controller that when you look at it, it's like, this is completely unintuitive. But then when you put it on, it feels like your hands. It actually feels like your hands. And I don't know if it's the end solution, but it certainly seemed like a step forward in some ways. There is something about it that, like, when you hold it, you're like, okay, you put it in your hand, and then you lift your finger from the thing, and you see a finger move. So it becomes very much more.
Oh, super neat.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I'm not I'm not sure that's the right solution, but it seemed like a step forward. But the problem is, like, how do you type? How do you do this?
And what about neural interfaces? Are we all going to have, like, controllers in our bags? Or, like the little race cars you can run around now using your brain. Like, we can sense some sort of on-off signal that your brain projects.
Yes.
So, and that's just, recent. So where's that going to go?
I don't know. I've got this thing about trying to figure out the proper interfaces for VR. What is that interface so that people can work? And I'm having a thing, but we don't have to keep going in VR.
But I guess if it's a shooting game, you want to feel something that feels like a gun.
Sure.
But if it's not a thing that needs interface, let's say it's augmented reality, where let's say you can't hear, you're deaf, and it subtitles the world for you. You don't need an interface for that. The interface just
you're
does
right.
the job.
And I think there's a lot of VR. There's a lot of VR experiences that don't need interfaces.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But since you're an experience designer, not necessarily an interface designer, what do you think about the VR experience? What do you think the people are looking for when they actually try to experience VR? What would be the proper thing?
Well, like VR versus AR, from what I've observed and what I've felt, is full-on immersion. Like, take me into your world.
Right.
That's all it is. So, in a way, what you do with your hands might matter less because of the way you're the story you're being told.
But you also see your real hands.
Oh, yes. Actually, I think that was a big problem in early VR, is the lack of hands and them not being your hands. And this it helped add, perhaps, to, like, this
sense
unstable
of, disembodiment, right?
Yeah, that's the perfect word for it. Yeah.
Right.
But if you can see your feet, you look
I
at
heard
your
that's
feet.
another thing, that seeing your feet could actually help.
I think it was huge. And men and women in studies, and these studies go back to, like, the American military in the 40s, of how differently men and women experience VR.
Oh, yeah?
There was, I don't know, now, but there was this test done on, like, people going through sex reassignment surgery who had tried VR before and afterwards, and they're grabbing doorknobs in a different way. They're experiencing nausea and dizziness in a different way.
Interesting.
And there's perhaps a hormonal difference in the way people, like, process this visual information. And that, we don't know this stuff yet. It's fairly new.
Okay.
But I'm sure the military does, because they've been doing this for, like, 60 years. But that's locked up in under a mountain.
You think
somewhere.
the military knows about people going through sex changes? Yes, and I think there's a lot of. That's another thing that's really nice about VR, is the idea that you can experience things as a different person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
There was a conversation about, actually, I think Keely brought it up today when in her talk, about having a VR application to experience architecture, but you're experiencing it as a child.
Yes.
And I've actually, so there is a demo that you spoke about IKEA. So IKEA made a VR demo, which is a really simple one. It's basically just an IKEA kitchen, and you get to operate, like, you open the drawers, you get things, et cetera, et cetera. And there's an option in there to say, what if I'm 2 meters tall? And then suddenly, like, everything gets, like, whoa, you realize the trouble of being 2 meters tall.
Right.
and then you experience it as a child and you realize the counters are like down here, right?
Yeah.
So suddenly, like, just from doing that experience, and I see my son, who's 7 years old, trying to pour himself a bowl of cereal and pour milk in it. It's not that he's clumsy, it's really hard. Imagine doing this, where you're trying to like pour some milk. That's hard.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
5 feet
experienced that in the
I
IKEA kitchen. I'm like, I am very sympathetic about him trying to pour milk, and he's going to learn it, but if he spills it, it's hard.
Yes, and that's when you said sympathetic, like it builds an empathy that I don't
Right.
know was possible quite before. You see it in like war reporting and like the IKEA thing. Like I'm 5'1". I experience the world. I think I go up to your belly button. It's like when we stand next.
I'm
to
a little
each
tall.
other.
You're a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit like VC, vertically challenged.
Yeah, but like a child lost in crowd, I used to get lost all the time,
Right.
and maybe that's because I was a short child.
Right,
like,
right,
versus
right.
just.
No,
scattered.
it's true, but it's like it is a thing, right? And like experiencing things from different perspectives are different. But I think here's what I liked about the IKEA demo that was different from other demos. A lot of other demos, there's something going wrong because I'm a tall guy, right? I'm 6'3", which is about 185 or so. No, 195 or one or so in meters. I always feel like my feet are cut off
What really?
because I'm too tall.
Oh,
And so they
so
designed the
this-
experience for someone a different height.
Yep.
But somehow the IKEA experience that I saw still made me feel like the ground was at the same distance, but everything was smaller or bigger around me.
Did you see your feet or no?
No, I didn't
You
see my
did?
feet.
Oh, interesting.
But I could still experience it that way. So there's a technical way of making it happen that's a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, there's so many unknowns in this world of like just simple things like height or the frame rate and the confusion that might cost, or I don't know, like it's kind of interesting the unexplored nature of it. Like if anybody told you they have the answer, they're liars. They don't. We're kind of just messing around as we go.
Yeah. Well, we're getting towards the end here,
Oh,
but I
wow,
want to make sure that did go fast.
Yeah,
right?
it did.
Was it fun?
Yeah, it's really fun.
Okay. Good. I'm glad you had fun. But can people get in touch with you or find out more about your work or anything else? Or where's a good place to get in touch?
Well, I don't tweet. I have a Twitter that I don't use. LinkedIn is
LinkedIn?
probably the most.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how do you spell your name?
Oh, ready?
Okay.
So I feel very at home in Europe because my last name is all consonants, but it's Jessica, and last name is R-U-D as in dog, Z as in zebra, E-W-I-C-Z, Jessica Rudzevic.
Rudzevic? Very Polish.
I know, very full. I'm like totally at home here. Like,
Awesome.
yeah, I'm married to Rory, and he's like, change your name. I'm like, but then I'll be a Robinson.
Yeah.
Like,
Jessica Robinson, yeah.
I don't know if I can make that leap that quickly.
Okay. Well, that sounds
be-
good. All right. Well, thanks so much, Jessica.
Cool. Thank
Thank
you.
All right. Thanks you guys so much. I'm out for today, or for now. Actually, no, I'll be back later for a little wrap-up video with the other guys, with Ian and Haya. But hopefully you guys enjoyed these talks. And let us know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. So for right now, we're going to go see Miguel down on the streets of Troya, talking to some of the other great THU attendees. Thanks, guys.